Well, hey guys, good morning. Actually, good afternoon or good evening, depending on when you're listening
Good
to
morning.
this.
What is this?
I
The Truman Show. You remember that? Didn't he say that?
I
Good
never.
morning, good evening, whatever.
I think you're speaking to a generation that
Never saw
probably
that movie.
I never saw
It's
it.
a great movie. Jim Carrey.
Yeah.
Come on.
Oh,
The
that's
Truman
right.
Show.
I did see that.
Come
yeah,
on,
yeah.
it's great.
Okay.
Good morning, good evening, and
What I
whatever.
should say is Merry Christmas, because that applies to whatever time of day it is.
Yeah, and we're going to talk about
We're
Christmas
bringing some
today.
serious Christmas vibes here from our
Serious?
house to yours. Yeah.
Well, we're bringing.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I'm excited about this because I've been watching on social media, as many of us have, and taking a peek into the lives of many of us that are going hard and crazy already in this season, which is unfortunate because I feel like our culture has taken Christmas and has made it such a bigger burden than it was ever
Yeah.
intended to be.
Yeah.
And there's so many things going on. And you tease me about, having my decorations up, but
We're going to talk about that. We're
yeah.
not going to
I'm
let
not
that
as
go.
bad as Hobby Lobby though,
Yeah,
because they start like in August.
Yeah.
So
So do you.
so here's the deal. Today we're going to be talking about a minimalist Christmas. But that being said, in the vein of complicating things, I want to wish you a Merry Christmahana Kwanzaa, which would cover everything.
All right then. All right then.
Oh, we're getting complicated again.
Yeah. So minimalist Christmas. I like the idea of a minimalist.
A mental
Very
Christmas.
hard to say. Minimalist
Yeah.
lifestyle. I like that idea. I don't do it
I
myself.
like it in theory.
Yeah.
And I actually watch,
like
especially on
stuff.
HGTV, the tiny home living. Some of you know what
Yeah.
I'm talking about. And I
Oh,
think
yeah.
I could do that.
Yeah, and I think
I love
I
that.
could never do that.
And whenever I watch one of those shows, I want to go clean out a closet because I'm thinking I have too much stuff. And
Yeah.
that's what we do. We accumulate things
Right.
in our life and on our calendar around Christmas because there is a lot going on. And I think that's what we want to address.
So here's the thing about minimalism. It's kind of a popular thing, especially
yeah.
among millennials. And
Say that really fast together.
I
Millennial
can't.
minimalism.
I don't even try, But it's something that is really admirable on, my generation, baby boomer. You're not a baby boomer. You're a Gen
Almost.
Xer.
I'm like 5 years out from it or something. was
You're
it?
just too young to
so
be a
close.
baby boomer.
Okay.
That's all I'm saying.
I like it.
Anyway, as a baby boomer, I have kind of the generation where we pursued and so forth. And Christmas became a big deal.
Yes.
So like the generation I grew up, my parents were World War II generation. They didn't have much money, and they gave pretty minimal gifts, which was kind of a good deal. But we grew up in this kind of pursuit of success. The baby boomers, okay,
More
boomer.
stuff.
But anyway, so it was one of those things where you got to go, we got to get more stuff.
Yeah.
And it made Christmas a little crazy. So what I want to do, what we want to do is talk about how we can kind of slow things down. First of all, what is Christmas about? Think about Jesus, who was born in a manger.
Yeah. Talk about simple living.
I was really shocked when I was about 15 or 16 years old when my dad was preaching and explaining what a manger is, that it's a trough.
Yeah.
It's an animal trough.
Yep.
And like, what? So he was put in a trough. And he started out this humble life. Why did he do that? He could have been born, because he's the king, actually the King of Kings, the greatest king. He's the creator of the universe. However, he lived a life of humility. And it reminds me of this verse, and I don't want to totally unpack this, but I want to share it. And it says this: have this mind among yourselves, which was in Christ Jesus, who, though he was in the form of God, did not count equality with God a thing to be grasped. This is, by the way, Philippians 2. And verse 7 says, but he emptied himself, took the form of a servant, being born in the likeness of men, and being found in human form, he humbled himself, became obedient to the point of death, even death on the cross. Therefore, God has highly exalted him, bestowed on him the name which is above every name. So here's this minimalist approach to the life of the one who would be the Messiah.
Yeah.
So the Old Testament refers to the coming Messiah, and the Messiah is going to control the world, the political powers. And one day that will happen, but that has not happened yet. And he first came to be the Savior. And of course, he offered the kingdom, but the kingdom was refused. But I believe that Christmas should be the ultimate minimalist approach because of Jesus, if we're really going to celebrate his birth. So my kids are thinking, or my grandkids are thinking, okay, we're going to get ripped off this year. So
I was going to say, practically, you got to take a look at what does that really look like? What does that mean for your family? Because we're throwing out ideas today, but I think everybody, you kind of say, how can I move closer to the simple message of Christmas instead of the complicated message?
So here, let me just kind of, there's this idea of being frugal and the idea of being minimal. Those are not two of the same things. So minimal is seen as better than extravagant by people who live that lifestyle. In fact, they feel like, they sense that they are superior to those of us who are extravagant. and I get that sense that there's like something wrong with me because the house is more larger than we need or something. And minimalism is a great idea, but it's not for everybody. Frugal is for everybody. Frugal is seen as being responsible with what you have. So if God has blessed you with much financially, you need to live within your means. That's the idea of frugal living.
Yeah, I like that.
Christmas is not really a place, I think, for extravagance or wasteful spending. And being frugal is really not about being a Scrooge. Because some people go, well, somebody will level, you're tight. No, I'm frugal. And some people are tight.
I was going to say, and some people
frugal.
are Scrooges.
Yeah, they're just, they wouldn't give a gift unless they have to. So here's kind of what I want to do. Think about expectations at Christmas.
Well, don't you think most people have expectations around, big holidays, especially Christmas, based on their family of origin. So how they expressed and celebrated that season. Often you feel tethered to that as an adult in raising your own children. And sometimes the bar is really high and you feel like you can't reach it. And then sometimes the bar is so low and you're trying to do better than your parents did for you.
Oh, that's for me. I would get a gift and go, I remember this one year. And I just think about some of these videos of kids that are not thankful for what they got, and they're yelling and screaming and cussing and stuff. Anyway, I was this little kid, and I told my parents I wanted a car set that goes on a track, like not a train, but a car set. And I wanted this electric. I was very specific, and it was a little pricey, but not outrageous. And I opened up the gift. I said nothing about this, but I opened up the gift and it wasn't electric. It was battery operated, which meant that the cars went really slow. So you could not make the car actually spin off of the track. That's what I wanted. I wanted that kind of, and I was so disappointed. And then I felt shame that I was disappointed. And I kept all of that in because I didn't want my parents to feel badly about that. But I was thinking like, you guys are really cheap. But they got 6 kids.
I was going to say they were being frugal.
Yeah. And then, so as I started getting kids, when I look at those kids, I want to give them more than I got. And
that's what a lot of people deal with.
And so the family of origin does affect us.
It does.
Doesn't it?
It really does. And I think a lot of traditions that we carry through around Christmas has to do with how we were raised. Obviously, a lot of these things are not bad or good necessarily, but when you try to fit it all in your life, or you try to repeat and duplicate, and then the culture is adding extra things onto your life, then it gets very complicated and we lose that simple message of Christmas.
So when speaking about traditions, did you ever lie to the children about Santa Claus?
No, I didn't. I
Did
actually
you tell them? Did you break their hearts?
No,
and tell them Santa's a
I
lie?
just never led them to believe that Santa was real, but we always incorporated him in songs, and I was never a big Santa fan. Now, interestingly enough, my parents did every year give me a gift from Santa. It wasn't a religious thing.
They actually wrote on there from Santa.
Yeah.
That's
and I
heathen.
always knew
That's
Santa.
ungodly.
I knew Santa wasn't real. But there are families who
was Santa in your mind?
Okay, so my dad.
Your dad?
He had the belly.
Okay, sorry, I interrupted you. Go ahead. He had the belly.
and the wallet.
And he's gray. He has a gray beard.
Yeah, he doesn't have the
It's
tummy
a
anymore.
little.
But yeah.
He has a gray hair, but not a complete head of gray hair.
Right?
But he has some gray hair.
Santa's reindeers have run a track over the top of his head.
Well, he was heavy back in those days. He's
Or
lost
Mrs.
his way.
Claus has gone over his head so many times it's created a track.
All right, no more bald jokes. All right. So, but Santa Claus was not a big factor.
Not a big factor. Now this is interesting. I know our daughter Carrie, our oldest, they have told the kids that there's a real Santa, and they've gone in hard for years until they hit a certain age, and then it was
23.
Like you crush their hearts and tell them he's not real. So I'm not saying that's wrong. We just didn't do it.
Yeah. So I didn't do it with the kids, but
with your two older kids.
With the two older kids, but their grandmother, maternal grandmother, had this whole thing where she would actually rent a Santa Claus suit. Yeah. And their grandfather, maternal grandfather,
sweet.
would dress up, and then in the middle of the night, well, actually it was like before it got light, would get the kids up, and they would see in there that it's, Santa Claus is getting the
cookies. Yeah,
getting the cookies and putting the presents under the tree. And I remember he goes, ho, ho, ho. And then he said, children, or something like that. And the kids go, hey, that's you, Grandpa. So it ruined the whole myth. I said, he's just a stand-in.
Yeah.
So Santa Claus was not real in our home.
Yeah.
Except at Grandma and Grandpa's house, they were heathen. They didn't love Jesus.
One of the things we did do was we opened up one present on Christmas Eve, which is, I guess, weird. I haven't heard of anybody else doing that.
Open one present on Christmas?
One present each kid.
A lot of people do that.
Yeah. Oh, they do?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
I never did.
Yeah, not your jam.
No, there wasn't enough presents to. you had to. When you're getting a couple of presents, and one of them is socks and underwear.
Yes.
You ever get to socks and underwear, and you just like open it up, and it's put in a box so you won't find out it's socks.
The only way it's cool when you're a kid is if it was like underoos, which some of you don't even know what
No,
that is.
we didn't have underoos when I was a kid.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a Gen Xer thing. That's not a baby boomer thing. We had one kind of underwear. Well, we had two, but anyway.
You had two pairs, and one was clean and one wasn't.
That's another.
And then you
that's
flip
not
it
a Christmas
inside
story.
out.
Let's keep moving. So,
that's what you do when you have 6 kids. I had 5 I raised with you. So
yeah. So what you did?
We went off track big time.
Yeah, we did. So that was your tradition to have.
Yeah.
Did you have like a Christmas Eve dinner?
Because my parents were pastors, and any of you in ministry know who are serving in ministry or volunteering, your Christmas season is wiped out with the church activities. Yeah. You have no life.
Christmas Eve service.
Yep, Christmas
At
Eve
our
service.
church, Eastlake Church, there are 3.
Yeah.
There have been
and
times where there's been even more.
It is precious, and I certainly appreciate it more today than I ever have. As a kid, you felt like you were being robbed because you had to go to all of those services when you're raised with people who serve or are on staff at a church. But looking back now, I think, man, we had the best life.
So we had traditions in our family. My mom. Oh, by the way, just not too long ago, we had the hanging of the greens.
Oh yeah, at Torrey Pines Church.
Yeah,
mm-hmm.
and I told somebody, and it's pretty traditional stuff. I said, because I had heard this joke, I said, okay, I don't know what the greens did, but I'm not going to miss their hanging.
That's so So bad.
Is that wrong? But it's a tradition. It's like a Western Christian.
Wow.
I actually did a little study on it because the person was offended that I said that.
You said that?
But, yeah.
I'd never heard of that until this last year.
Yeah.
So it depends on how you
So the
raised.
hanging of the greens, what we did was they have like 12 wreaths, and these wreaths am I saying that wreath?
Yeah, wreaths.
Wreaths. It's really hard to say. Wreaths. And the wreaths are taken down the aisle, and you read a scripture about the names of Christ. Okay, good tradition. I actually like it. It was fun. But the tradition we had growing up was my mom was an artist, and she was very committed to building things and stuff like that. She worked with, power tools and stuff. And so she made her own display on a lawn display.
I love that.
And she had the nativity scene, and she had full, well, they weren't full size, but they were very larger than a full grown man.
Right.
Camels and different. And then she had the baby Jesus in there. And then on top of the roof of our house, she had a star. And she had, it was amazing. She
was an
actually
incredible
won
woman.
awards
That's
for
amazing.
Christmas displays.
Yeah.
And it was
That's
kind
not
of
very
a neat thing.
minimalist, but
That wasn't, but it was, she made it all herself. So it was kind of
that's
a minimal.
incredible. DIY'd it. Yeah.
DIY before DIY was
I know,
awesome.
cool. Yeah.
Anyway, so that was one of our traditions. And I remember one year she didn't do it. And I was so disappointed.
Yeah.
It was like Christmas was ruined, but I got a good present that year, so
That's good.
it's all about
So I have
me.
a question about that with exterior decorations. Wait, are you a minimalist or are you lazy if it means that you don't put lights up any year?
I'm a non-existent. I can't stand putting Christmas lights up,
So
as
we
you
don't.
know. Okay, but one year, this is true story. I was in my 50s, okay? That may have been a while back. But I was in my 50s. I'm up on the ladder putting up these hooks to be able, setting the hooks in to be able to put the lights in. And I literally, the ladder fell out from under me, and I fell all the way to the ground, flat on my back with a big thud. You were there watching. You don't remember this?
I do not remember this.
Yeah, and you go, man, I can't believe how often you fall and nothing happens to you.
Right.
Yeah, you remember saying that?
Yeah.
Yeah, and I'm like, if I fell now, that would be it. You'd have to find a new husband.
Not again.
Not again. Yeah. So anyway, I'm
My new
not a big
Christmas
fan.
surprise.
I would hire somebody to do it, but that's not a minimalist approach.
Yeah.
So
you could blame it on that though. You could be like really
yes, of
righteous
course.
about it. Like, I'm a minimalist. I don't hang lights.
So we didn't open presents on Christmas Eve. We opened presents on Christmas morning.
Right.
What happens when life turns out, and I kind of turn this to a little more somber area, and that is what happens when life turns out differently than what you planned.
Right.
Financial problems. Maybe one year you can't even handle. There have been times in families where they go, okay, the parents aren't going to buy for each other, or they're going to make gifts. I mean, that actually is not a bad idea.
No, I think
although
it's a great
kids don't
idea.
appreciate it that much.
Yeah.
As long as you buy them something nice.
Yeah.
But maybe there was a divorce in the
Right.
family
Yep.
or an illness. We have a friend who is just very ill right now, and just our hearts go out to her family and so forth. And it just is really tough to watch that. But I was thinking about, and you know about this, and I know about the first area I'm going to talk about. You know about the second area. The first one is about being single at Christmas. And I want you to talk about what it's like to be a single parent at Christmas.
Yeah.
Because you were a single parent. I was as single as, for several years, I was single. I was divorced and found myself single. And it can be a tough time of
Oh
the
my
year
goodness, so
because
difficult.
what happens is you're watching other families. It's such a family time. And here I was living in Northern California, and I had friends. Of course, they had families. I didn't want to kind of butt in on their stuff, so I just kind of stayed to myself. Actually, I wasn't in Northern California. I was here in San Diego. remember that correctly now. But I didn't want to bother my friends. So, you know, and my children were grown. So I was kind of by myself.
Kind of isolated.
Yeah, and I'm actually a loner, but I don't want to be alone on Christmas.
Yeah.
And it was the toughest thing, I think, for singles is at Christmas time to see families.
Right.
And I'm glad for them. But I'll tell you, that year I was all about Christmas at Christmas Eve service.
I was just gonna say.
And on Christmas morning or Christmas Day, I actually did something that I had done earlier on in my life, but I served in giving food out at a shelter. Yeah, for the homeless, and it really meant a lot to me. But just in the time that we have here, would you talk about being a single parent?
For those of you who can relate to what Tim's talking about, and I'll just share briefly my experience. Christmas obviously can bring out the most painful, deeply painful times, and it is easy to look at other families and compare your life and feel like yours is lacking. As a single mom of 5 kids at that time, they were 11 down to 1, and I became a single mom for the next 3 years. What rescued my heart and my kids' heart was jumping into community at our church in serving.
Yeah.
And so because here at the beginning of the show is joking about how when you're a kid, you give your life over to the church. Let me tell you something. As a woman with 5 young children, it gave us a place to go on those evenings before actual Christmas day and serve and to be around people and frankly, the presence of the Lord, and reminded of the real message of Christmas. We received incredible love and support. And the most beautiful thing happened. I'll never forget getting called into one of the pastor's office, he and his wife, and their connect group, community group, had quietly gone behind the scenes and adopted me and my 5 children for Christmas. And I walked into, I'm going to cry, sorry, his office, and there were presents wrapped all over the place. And they basically sent the kids and I home with a minivan full of Christmas gifts. And never before had I felt like such a tangible hand of God of comfort. And I can tell you, if that's you this year, where you're alone, let me just encourage you. It's not about the gifts. Of course, the gifts, it was a beautiful representation of God showing his care for my children. It was that people showed their care and love for us. That was the greatest gift for me that year. And so somebody wants to do that for you. And I would encourage you, though, to be the one that would say, I may feel like I have nothing, but I have something to give to someone else. Be the gift to somebody else this Christmas. Be a part of a community where you can serve serve the homeless, or serve your neighbor, or invite others into your home that also have nowhere else to go, and have a Christmas breakfast. Become family to somebody this Christmas, and it is the greatest. It goes back to that simple message that Jesus came and he gave. He gave his son. Well, God gave his son through Jesus Christ. It's a simple Christmas message, and it gets back to that, the incredible sense of hope that brings.
I remember this lady in our churches years ago, probably about 30 years ago. Here we just had little kids and or young children, and this lady's husband died, and she's a widow. It's her first Christmas as a widow. And she was actually a young widow. She was probably about 50. I don't remember exactly, maybe 55 or so. And we said, would you come over for Christmas? She goes, no, I don't want to do that. And it was such a good time. Yeah. She did come, and she enjoyed helping make the meal and so forth. Yeah. It's really a powerful thing when you can do that. That's a meaningful memory. You've shared that with me so many times.
Yeah, it's always this time of year comes back, and but it's a sweet reminder that when we get caught up in those stressors around Christmas, that our culture says the things that we need to do and the places we need to go and the events we need to host and all of that, that really it is about giving yourself away and opening your heart to someone else that may need that comfort.
Here's the thing. Let's think about this. If you're going to spend X amount of dollars at Christmas season, why not look for a way where you can invest in other people, like a single mother, like a widow or a widower, or a single dad, of course, yes, a single parent, I should say. And, look for those opportunities to reach somebody, maybe a family that's ill, or someone that's ill in the family, and see if you can sponsor. One of the most meaningful things to me, I mean, I've talked about these people before. I felt like they were my family for years here in San Diego. Those who are local San Diegos remember the Jeff and Jer show.
Yeah.
And Jeff and Jer, they had this kind of a cool friendship and so forth. And there was a guy on the show, little Tommy Sablon, little Tommy, they called him. Yeah. Tommy grew up with a single mother here in South Bay, in Chula Vista, where we live. And he's got the biggest heart in the world. Actually, that gets me choked up. Every year, they did a break-in Christmas.
Yeah, I remember that.
And they would sponsor a family, and they would break into the house. They get sometimes family members, a friend or so forth, and a needy family, and they put it over the radio so you can hear it. And Tommy would talk real quiet, and it was such a big deal. Yeah. And I was like so proud.
Give them gifts, and
I felt like I was a part of that, and it was such a beautiful thing. That's the kind of stuff that makes difference. One last story. Tim LaHaye, who was a pastor at my previous church before me, and he used to take his kids, and they would sponsor a family, and they would take gifts and all kinds of food and so forth, those families. And I never heard him talk about it. And I never heard any of his friends talk about it. But one day somebody shared with me, after Pastor LaHaye had already left the church, and shared with me how he did this. And I thought, wow, what a beautiful heart of giving. Christmas doesn't have to be extravagant. You can make it minimal, and you can make a difference in people's lives. And maybe you don't even have the money to do that. Maybe it's just inviting somebody over for a simple moment with your family.
Or taking someone a pie.
Anything.
Yeah, anything.
And just show some love. Christmas is a great time, but it's all about Christ. So let's make it as minimal as Christ did. He was born in a manger. And we need to have this mind, which was in Christ Jesus, who humbled himself and took on the form of a servant. That's for us to do as well. Thanks for listening to the podcast. We're going to spend another week talking about Christmas. I hope you'll join us next week, and I hope you have a Merry Christmas. You have a great season and out there shopping. Enjoy your time. God bless you. Have a great week.
Bye, guys.